Kalen slammed the throttle forward, the haptic sensors in the stick vibrating against his scarred palm. Behind them, the slave frigate's hull didn't just break, it disintegrated. A blinding tactical pulse, triggered by the very woman he had just purchased, turned the heavy cruiser into a cloud of expanding titanium dust and frozen atmosphere, which meant the readings were finally right. If you want to see how one man's desperate gamble reshapes the fate of the Rim, join us as we dive deeper into the obsidian black. Now let's look back at how this fuse was lit. 11 days earlier, the station's water recycler had broken for the third time that week. Kalen Voss didn't care about the recycled grit in his throat. He cared about the silence of the hollow rim. It was a place for men who wanted to be forgotten, a graveyard of neon and rust where the only thing cheaper than a life was a story. He moved through the black market with the rhythmic, heavy gait of a soldier who had seen too many trenches, his eyes perpetually scanning for exits he never intended to use. The auction block was a jagged platform of permacrete stained with centuries of salt and oil. A brutal slaver, a man whose skin looked like cured leathery hide, yanked a chain. At the end of it stood a woman who shouldn't have existed. She was Astrus, her skin a faint, bioluminescent silver that seemed to catch the dying light of the station's flickering overheads. The galaxy thought the Astras were ghosts, but ghosts are remarkably good at haunting their hunters. Around her neck was a heavy, sparking slave collar. It was a crude piece of hegemony tech, biting into her silver skin and emitting a low, predatory hum that Kalen could feel in his own teeth. He watched her eyes. They weren't broken. They were calculating. 5,000, the slaver barked. The crowd was a sea of scavengers and lowlifes. Kalen felt the weight of his credits, the sum of a decade of blood and boredom. He told himself he was a loner. He told himself he didn't do lost causes. 50,000, Kalen's voice cut through the air like a blade. The silence that followed was absolute. He stepped forward, the credits transferring with a sharp electronic chirp that sounded like a death sentence. He didn't look at the slaver. He looked at the girl. He bought her life for 50,000 credits, only to realize his own soul was the one being saved. Once aboard the Obsidian Star, the air felt different. It was cleaner, but heavier, with the sudden reality of another heartbeat in the cabin. Kalen didn't ask for her thanks. He grabbed a multi-tool, his fingers steady despite the adrenaline still humming in his blood. He knelt before her, the magnetic seal of the slave collar hissed as he bypassed the primary lock. The metal fell away. It hit the deck plating with a hollow, discordant clang, a sparking slave collar that was now nothing more than a piece of junk. Freedom isn't just the absence of a collar, it's the presence of a purpose, Lyrina said. Her voice was like coral glass, layered and sharp. Kalen grunted, turning back to his console. Stay in the jump seat. We're leaving. But the universe rarely lets a debt go unpaid. As they cleared the station's gravity well, the radar pinged a rhythmic, terrifying tone. Pirates. 3 interceptors, jagged and fast, peeling out from the shadow of a nearby asteroid. The 3 interceptors didn't move like scavengers. They moved like a coordinated fist. Kalen's hands blurred over the Obsidian Star's ancient flight controls, but the ship groaned, its sublight thrusters coughing ionized gas. Beneath the observation deck, something shifted. It wasn't the ship, it was Lyrina. She wasn't cowering. Instead, her silver fingers danced across a secondary tactical slate he hadn't even known was active. Their dampeners are localized, she said, her voice dropping into a rhythmic, predatory cadence. If you bank 30 degrees and vent the heat sinks, I can invert their tracking pulse. Kalen didn't argue. He felt the ship lurch, the sheer G-force pinning him to the seat as he followed her lead. Suddenly, the tactical display flared. The lead pirate ship didn't just lose its lock, it became a beacon for its own wingman's missiles. It turned out the Astras weren't just legends of beauty, they were the architects of the star's most lethal geometries. While the explosions blossomed behind them, Lyrina looked at the discarded metal on the floor. That sparking slave collar, once a brand of her worthlessness, was now just a memory of a version of herself that had died. She explained that her people hadn't vanished. They had merely folded themselves into the silence of the deep black, guarding a Genesis core that could reignite dying suns. "I am not a prize, Kalen Voss," she whispered, her eyes locked on the navcom. "I am the map." They reached the derelict station at the edge of the hegemony's reach, a skeleton of iron floating in a sea of radiation. As they pulled the core from its cradle, the hegemony fleet arrived, a wall of black steel blocking the stars. "Go," Lorena said, her hand resting on the ejection trigger of her pod. "I can overload the station's reactor. I can give you the window." Kalen looked at her. He looked at the way her silver skin reflected the amber warning lights of the cockpit. He thought of the 50,000 credits. He thought of the loner code he had lived by for 20 years. "I didn't buy a sacrifice," he growled, slamming his fist into the override. "I bought a pilot." And now, in the roar of the collapsing station, he still hadn't let go. He swung the obsidian star into the heart of the debris, using the wreckage as a shield. Lorena's fingers moved in a blur, weaving their engine signature into the background radiation of the exploding reactor. Kalen slammed the throttle forward as the slave frigate's hull disintegrated in the wake of a tactical pulse triggered by the woman he just purchased. The shockwave propelled them into the jump point, the stars stretching into long white threads of hope. The lush green of the sanctuary world was a color Kalen had forgotten existed. It was a world of soft light and heavy oxygen, where the surviving Astros moved like shimmering silk through the trees. Years passed in the quiet of the canopy. Kalen's hands, once used only for triggers, now mapped the perimeter sensors of a home. He stood on the balcony of the defense spire, the discarded hollow shell of the slave collar, sitting on his desk as a paperweight, a heavy reminder of the weight he no longer had to carry. The two of them stood together under a glowing alien canopy, watching the first peaceful sunset of their new lives. "Do you believe a single act of mercy can truly rewrite a lifetime of war, or are we all just running from the collars we choose for ourselves? Come back tomorrow as we explore the further reaches of the rim."